Yeah, for us, it's never been a ag exemption or a tax exemption. Like, it's always been about the product. So like the other day I saw some ridiculous thing on the internet that said you're focusing too much on the product. And I thought, like, that could not be worse advice. Like, it is all about the product. Like, it's all about what we're bringing up out of the soil, you know? So it's never been an ag exemption. It's never been a tax exemption. It's just been about creating great food. And you know, food happens to be our product. We wake up every morning and focus on the product. The people, animals, plants, and equipment all focuses around creating better soil, and the better soil always creates a better product. But truly, like, one of the best parts of all of this is our quality of life that we get from growing food like this. We're able to enjoy all these green and growing plants and pretty pastures and happy animals, and get to enjoy people come out and see this land. And so everything that we've always done here has always been just really, really pleasant to our quality of life. This is our beef herd. These are one of the first cows that we got probably 7 years ago. She's half Charolais, half Brahman, just like her sister there. Then we've switched to Angus as the years have gone on. That little calf over there is about a week old. And that's Mikey, our bull. He's half Hereford, half Brahman. And they've just been really, really easy to manage, especially with this hot wire. But you got to get them broke to it. And once you can control them with this hot wire, they're just the greatest creature ever to have around on the farm. We literally grew twice as much forage when we implemented animals and hot wire than when we were just a hay farm. So it's just one thing that keeps us profitable is very few products. Very few products. So, like, you know, we want all the money going into things that go up in value, like cattle, maybe land. And so things like this, that one, don't go down in value, and two, don't cost a whole lot to start, to buy, have always paid off for us. But the alternative to this $4,000 system is a $200,000 pivot, or maybe a $100,000 pivot for 20 acres. And that $100,000 pivot is a great big moving machine that goes down in value. Whereas this little system, I paid $4,000 for it 10 years ago, and it's probably still worth $4,000, but it does the exact same job as the big pivot, with just a little bit of work from us by having to move it around like this. Instead of just buying the best equipment, or, you know, the new pickup or the new tractor or the new piece of farm equipment or the new planter or whatever, you know, instead of buying a $5,000 planter that would have been a lot easier to plant those melons out there that we just watered, we do it by hand every year still, you know, and it's a lot harder. And right now we probably know how to grow the melons to where a planter could eventually pay for itself. But, you know, just planting them by hand has worked for 10 years. And so we'll probably continue to do it for a few years longer, because sometimes the hard way isn't the hard way when it's profitable, and it just means a little extra physical labor. Like, I would always rather do a little extra physical labor than buy another piece of equipment that's going to sit around and rust in a corner somewhere and that I have to mow around, you know, every 3 weeks in the summertime. I would rather just do a little bit of heavy lifting when I need to do that thing, whether it's picking up hay or planting a crop or whatever. It's just one of the benefits of doing everything in a smaller scale and a higher profitability is that you can do it the hard way and it still pays off in the end, because you don't have to always buy the very best of equipment and the very best of everything. So this $4,000 system with an existing house well can sustain 20 cows on 20 acres, all by holding them in these little paddocks with the hot wire that we get from PowerFlex, and moving the cattle in these small paddocks and then watering behind the cattle. So we're constantly chasing the cattle with the sprinklers and giving the ground a good long rest. So we'll water this, and in 30 days it'll look like that. And we've got the cattle coming along, you know, so they're gonna go onto that probably today. And then when it looks like this, we'll water it, and so we're just following the cattle with the K-line. I'm not telling anyone else how to farm, and I'm not gonna tell anyone else how to run their finances, but I can say definitively for us, doing everything with zero debt has been the most peaceful experience you could imagine. And it means that we can't grow really, really fast, but it also means that we can't fail really fast. And I love that, knowing that every night, everything is paid for. And if it hails, if a big storm coming in, and you know, you're looking forward to that storm and you know you're gonna get rain, but then in the back of your mind, you're thinking, man, well, what if it hails? You know, like it'll totally strip those tomato plants of everything. Well, if you had a bunch of debt on those tomato plants, that might keep you up a little longer. But knowing that, you know, it's all paid for, and if a hailstorm strips it down, well, we're just back to zero. We're not in the negative. And for us, everything has been great by not having debt. We mortgaged the house and we mortgaged this land for the first 10 years we were here, and we got it paid off as soon as we could. And ever since we did, it's been real good for us. I would mortgage a house again. I would mortgage some land again. But I wouldn't have, one thing I wouldn't do again, we never had debt on vehicles or tractors or crops or wells or equipment. And I would definitely not have debt on any of that again. I did have debt on a house and land. We had a plan to pay it off, and we did. But the peacefulness we get from knowing that all the equipment, all the crops, the wells, the tractors, the trucks, all of that is paid for in advance. To us, that's been a real peaceful way of farming and living. This is 400 feet long, and we have 4 rows of melons planted here. So there's a melon planted every 2 feet, a seed planted every 2 feet. So that's 200 melon plants on every row, and there's 4 rows. So that's 800 plants out here. If every melon plant grows just 2 melons, that's 1,600 melons. We sell those melons at the farmer's market for $5 a piece. So that's $9,000 in melons on this 1/4 acre of ground. So that's a pretty good return in 90 days. There is some labor involved in that, you know, so there's probably $1,000 in labor, either that we pay ourselves, or we pay the kids, or we pay Tori or someone else that's helping us. But the profitability of these small farms, when you have water and good soil, there's just a lot you can do with it. So we've kind of wondered, you know, the farm has doubled itself year over year for 4 or 5 years now, but we've kind of wondered, at what point is what we have as far as like production, is that enough, you know? Because it kind of comes to a point where you're creating enough income to raise a family and sustain the farm and grow more crops year after year. But you know, like, to grow more crops, you might need more people and you might need more equipment, and then inevitably that might end up with more stress. So the great thing about this kind of farming is that it's very stress-free, and that goes back into what we talked about with, you know, no debt and no problems, and nice people that work here, that want to work here. So we create an environment where people want to work here and want to come here, and customers want to support us, which is an absolute blessing. But I can kind of see how there might be a point in the business of the farm that as we keep growing, maybe we can kind of just outgrow our peacefulness. And so where we're at now is real good for us, and we'll continue to grow, but we grow very cautiously, because I just don't think all growth is good growth. Like, we've been approached by several groups, or even like kind of academic groups that want to help us grow to wholesale. And every single time that I look at the numbers of wholesale, or we get an offer to do something wholesale, like there's just nothing in it that's appealing to us. So we do everything retail. I think this model works very, very well for us, because we know when we see a product growing out there, we know exactly what we're going to get for that product. We don't have to worry about a broker or a buyer or a store or a wholesaler or even a restaurant wanting a lower price, or wanting more at a lower price, or not wanting it at all because it's just not something they need that day. So we've just always done real well with everything retail, and to date, doing anything wholesale for us has not really dollared out on the farm at all. So we love to do everything retail. It gives us more of a connection to the customers, so we know what they want and what they're enjoying and what they want more of. We just love being a part of the end consumer side of growing food, as opposed to dealing with a middleman. And like, we really appreciate all the restaurants that support this kind of agriculture, or brokers or grocery stores or any of that. And I know there's a lot of people that maybe, a lot of people growing like this that maybe don't really enjoy the personal side of it as much as we do, but we just really like connecting with the individual consumer and selling everything retail. It really pays to think 5 years down the road, because you're going to plant a papal tree or a sumac tree or whatever now, and it'll be virtually free today, but in 5 years, what would that do in value to your land, or the amount of fruit you get off of it, or the profit from selling it in a 5-gallon bucket for $40,
Yeah.
But it's all about doing it today and benefiting from it 5 years from now. But you just really have to, with all of this farming, you really have to have that multi-year mentality, because the fact is, like we were talking about earlier, you're going to be here 5 years from now. So do something today that is going to benefit you in 5 years. People that I'd never even met thought about what things were going to be like for my generation, and so I'm always trying to think, what's it going to be like for the kids' generation? What can we do today that's going to benefit their children? And that's why we're planting fruit trees today that may not have the first fruit for 5 years, but in 40 years, the grandkids will be able to walk out there and pick fruit off of it every year, and they won't have to do anything for it. And hopefully they'll plant a tree for their grandkids, Yeah. We're 45 days away from having tomatoes. We planted those tomatoes 45 days ago. So you have to think about, what are we going to need in 90 days? And what we need in 90 days, I need to work on today. Yeah. And it's funny to me, and I guess 90 days is kind of the seasons, that everything on the farm kind of works in 90-day increments, to me at least, 90 to 120-day increments, whether it's the pasture grasses or the crops that we grow, the vegetable crops and fruit crops we grow for the farmers markets and stuff. But you've got to think a full 90 days in advance. And when you do, everything gets really easy, because then you're only, when you start this, you're 90 days away from having something. And then once you have something, then you plant something or do something that's going to grow something else 90 days away. So you always have this beautiful food and beautiful forage, but you just always got to be thinking in advance, just like you do in your kitchen. You think a week or two in advance, for buying things ready to your staples that you can create. And here on the farm, we need to do it 90 days in advance, because it takes a whole lot more time to grow than going to the grocery store. But if I ever hear again someone saying that it's all about volume, like I'll just never ever understand that. And I don't, I'm a total rookie when it comes to business. But what has worked for us is never worrying about volume and always worrying about profitability of any individual item. So I know when we were baling hay, we would take a 50-pound bale of hay and maybe make $2 on it. But then I quickly found out that we could take 50 pounds of grass and feed that to a cow and create 4 pounds of beef, which was worth $20, maybe $30. So you have to add the cow into that equation, and that adds another element of problems. But instead of trying to grow 50,000 bales of hay, this huge volume item, instead of trying to grow this 50,000 bales of hay, we try to grow 50 cows. And genuinely, 50 cows is a lot easier to manage than 50,000 bales of hay, because the hay is very heavy and you have to carry it everywhere and you have to pick it up in the field, and if it gets rained on, it gets ruined. And a cow is like God's greatest creation. It's just, it loves the rain. It finds a shade tree in the sun, and every day it creates $10 worth of beef, and then it naturally replenishes the soil. So, 50 pounds of beef is a lot more profitable for us and a lot more fun to be around than 500 bales of hay. And so people would often say that, any of these ventures, even like, the vegetables, for example, if you were to sell wholesale, the volume is a great thing, I guess. You can create a lot of it and make $1 a pound, but instead of growing 1,000 pounds of tomatoes and making $1 a pound, I'd rather grow 200 pounds of tomatoes and make $5 a pound, because 200 pounds of tomatoes is a whole lot easier to manage than 1,000 pounds of tomatoes. And the only difference is in how you provide it to the customer. Do you do it wholesale or do you do it retail? So volume has never been our game. It's always about quality of the product and finding the market for it. I never ever have bare soil without a seed in it ready to grow, but I sure can't stand looking at it when it's bare like this. Bare soil to me always looks like poverty. I want everything covered and green and growing. And so this was green and growing until about a week ago when we plowed it up and rode it like this. But I can't wait to get it covered in green again. To me, bare soil is just poverty waiting to happen. Like nobody wants to live on bare soil. No one wants to visit bare soil, and bare soil isn't creating any food. So we always want everything green and growing and never any bare soil, because bare soil just isn't creating any kind of environment that we want to live in, work in, or visit, and it's certainly not creating any food. So if we ever do have bare soil, it has a seed in it and it's waiting on a rain every single time. And we never ever will let a rain go to waste. So you never want rain falling on bare soil. You want it to have a seed in the ground that is going to grow and turn into a green and growing vegetative plant 7 days after that rain. So always something green and growing, never bare soil. If I ever get a chance to talk to someone that has a dream of raising livestock, especially for profit, is one thing that helped us is we were a hay farm before we ever had livestock. And so we had an excess of forage before we ever brought our first livestock on. And I think that's always benefited us from going way back. We always had an excess of forage. So we were never having to play catch up with trying to grow forage, or heaven forbid, buying feed or buying hay. So still to this day, we sell hay and still graze cattle on the same ground. So if there was one bit of advice I'd ever give someone that ever wanted cattle or sheep or goats, is make sure you have a plan. Make sure you have a lot of forage, and make sure you have a plan to regrow that forage. So a way to grow forage is with fertilizer and seeds and perennials and natives and everything, and get a lush green and growing pasture before you ever bring the first livestock on. But then realize they're going to eat that down quickly, quicker than you think. And so you need to have a process of sectioning them off like we do, and like a lot of people do with the paddock grazing. So have a process for sectioning your paddocks off to where you can graze it, rest it, move the cattle, and come back and graze more new forage in 30 or 40 or 60 days. But have a lot of forage to begin with and have a plan to regrow that forage after they eat it down. And just setting them and forgetting them is not a plan to grow more forage. They will nibble and walk and nibble and walk and trample it all down. And if you don't control them with the hot wire like we use, and never give the ground any rest time, you will never regrow that initial forage that they eat down. Of all of, everyone that's interested in this, from the consumers to the farmers to the people in the colleges that are studying this, scientists and everything, is really the coolest thing about all of this is the community. And so the people. When we first started, we quickly found people that were very helpful to us in other states, and thousands of miles away, but they were just so helpful to us getting started. And even today, there's, as more and more people have done this around South and Central Texas, having people that we could exchange ideas with and be a part of this community with us has just been really, really important for us. So I would say that a really important thing when it comes to starting anything like this kind of farming is to attach yourself to somebody that's doing it and is profitable, and somebody you want to emulate. And chances are that person would be more than willing to kind of open up their world to you and help you get started, especially when you have a genuine interest in it and they see that genuine interest. Because I've never asked a question to anyone about this kind of farming that they weren't just more than happy to help me with. And again, that's just one of the greatest parts about this kind of agriculture is the people. So lean on those people and get what knowledge you can from them, help them out, and then likewise pass it along to someone that's looking to do what you're doing 5 years from now. What worked for us with the farm was we bought the very best soil that we could possibly afford. And so initially we didn't worry too much about where that soil was at. We just worried about buying the very best soil that we could afford. So now that we're growing lots of things off of that soil, it's really easy for us to take the products from that soil and find a market for it. We didn't necessarily buy the farm in the exact perfect location or the exact location that we wanted to live in, but we bought the land where we could afford good soil and then take the products from that good soil to the areas that we probably would like to live in, or that a lot of people would like to live in. That's why there's literally millions of people living there. But we bought soil where we could afford it and didn't worry too much about where it was at. But we just knew that whatever we created off of that soil, we could get that product to where there were lots of people living. The sheep and goats have always fed into the whole operation, in that we used the sheep and goats a lot initially when we kind of overhayed everything. We had a whole lot of weeds out in the pasture, and so we leveraged Fiona's sheep addiction.
Did you already tell him about where I came from?
No, but Fiona came from a sheep property, wool
a
property.
merino sheep
in
property.
Australia.
We had cattle and farming too, but merino sheep were our main.
And so we leveraged the sheep to clean out the weeds, and we used goats too. So the kids showed goats and sheep and 4-H and FFA, and so we used those sheep and goats plus others that we had that we bought to clean up the weeds in the pastures, and I always account a lot for the fact that the pastures are so good today is a lot because we brought on sheep and goats for 3 and 4 years. And so these sheep are a little bit of a kind of a leftover, so to speak, like a leftover idea in having sheep, and Fiona's always enjoyed them. And so we got these wool sheep. We've always had meat sheep before, or hair sheep, but we got these wool sheep a couple years ago.
And these are miniature, they're Harlequins, which actually is a breed that was developed in the States. And one of the main breeds that it derived from was the South Down baby dolls. But these ones, the Harlequins, are supposed to be a little more resistant to parasites. Parasites are a huge deal down here in Texas, South Texas. So I bought my first 3 ewes that have had their first babies this year. This is their second shearing. So in 2 weeks we get back our first processed wool. So those 3 ewes that have just had babies, we sent their fleeces to the mill, and we're about to get the yarn back. These are the second, so we're skirting is what we're doing right now. Chloe, our lovely shearer, does a beautiful job, and so what we have to do though to prepare the fleece is just, it's called skirting, but it's basically getting all the matter, from their legs and belly, that sort of thing. We coat ours. There's a couple, our lambs that we will breed next year are in the next paddock, and they've got coats on. Usually our ewes do too, but because they were lambing, we took the coats off to shear, and then we haven't put them back on again, but we will do that. That protects the fleece from fading from the sun, but also from a lot of the vegetation that gets in there. So we want the fleece as clean as possible, and then we put them into these bags just for the moment, these cotton bags, and then we've got their names on them. We have 2 Harlequins. We actually have one of our ewes is a Cheviot Harlequin cross, and the fibre industry likes the Cheviot wool, so we thought we'd try that, doing a cross. But so then, we'll store them. Once we've completely skirted them, we'll take them to the mill and then wait for our yarn, which is pretty exciting. The fibre industry, when I say fibre industry, the people who, knit, use fibres, alpaca wool, all, small cottage industries, but they like the Harlequin colours, and we're trying to get spottier colours in. You can see this one's quite dark, but the ram that we leased this year was very spotty, and so we've got a couple of lovely lambs from him. That's the underside you see. So this is the outside. That's what was attached to her body, but Chloe does a beautiful job, and she's so patient with the sheep, and so it's a very, it's a really nice process. Very different to when I grew up, because we would have shearing for 2 weeks. There'd be thousands of sheep that we would shear, and we'd get contract shearers in, and I'd often be what we call the roustabout, so I'd be sweeping up and doing all that sort of work. But so this is a little bit different, but I love it. So it must be in my blood, I don't know.
The only thing, is that it's really nice when you can blend your hobby with your business. So we're not really at this point looking to make money off the wool, but they're great at regenerating the soil, and they're super gentle. Fiona can handle them really, really easy. Fiona and the kids can handle them really, really easy. So, Fiona's passionate about wool and wool products, and the sheep are really, really good at taking the nutrients from the plants right around the house that, we couldn't have cattle right up in here against the house. But the sheep is a ruminant just like the cattle, and so they recycle the nutrients from the forage. And being able to mix Fiona's passion of wool with the soil health and then using the sheep where we're gonna plant the vegetables, it's been very, very good the whole time we've been here, how we can mix hobbies with the profitability of the farm. Yeah, our whole mission for everything we've always done here has always just been to create a great product for us to enjoy and for other people to enjoy. So we've always wanted to grow really, really good food without any chemicals that at the same time brings carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil, builds better soil, which grows better plants, which grows better people, And so it's been a real blessing to be able to do this and to raise our family on land that is creating food, not only for us, but for all of the community. So that's what we've always tried to focus around, was creating great food and a great product for everyone around us. We've always tried to focus all of our efforts and certainly all of our money in investing in food, water, and shelter. So when we first started doing this, it was all about, I was just trying to grow hay, and then I quickly realized that not everybody in the world needs hay, and in fact very, very few people want hay, and really virtually nobody really needs it, but everybody needs food. And so we transitioned that hay growth, like that forage and that plant life that we were putting into hay, we transitioned that into food. So that's why we started grazing the cattle on it and started focusing a lot more on the vegetables and the fruit and the pecans and the chickens. And it was all just because we wanted all of our efforts creating more food and cleaner water and even shelter in that, the cabins and the better houses and better everything that we can enjoy. The very first thing that I would tell anyone that was interested in this is stop analyzing it and just start doing it. And we often get asked, how could we get into this? And like the first thing you could do to get into this, if you live in an apartment and you have a balcony, put 10 tomato plants on it. Grow food for you and your neighbor, That's the very first thing you could do. And then once you learn how to grow tomatoes in 10 pots, then go out in the common area of your apartment and talk the management into putting in 30 tomato plants. And then once you can do that, and once you figured out something to do with those, 300 tomatoes that you might create off of 30 tomato plants, then, go to the city and say, hey, there's an empty lot down here and we need to plant 4 different kinds of vegetables down there. And then, then go volunteer on a farm that's paddock grazing like we are and figure out how we do it. And then go to a guy with 100 acres of ground and who doesn't really, know how to manage it or know what to do with it, and tell him that, you could take care of it and for nothing for a year, and show him how you can improve that ground. And so you just scale up, incrementally from those 5 tomato plants that you started with on the balcony when you're 22 years old to 42 years old, being a subject matter expert in all this. What excites me the most about growing food like this is that, we do nothing with government programs. Tariffs don't affect us at all. What excites me is that I can create something from virtually nothing and then share it with people that are immediately around me. And all of the craziness that may or may not be going on in the world just doesn't matter to us. We just raise our kids and create a great food, share it with those around us, and it just doesn't matter what's happening in Washington or in other countries. Or like we're very self-sustaining in growing food like this, and that's, to me, that's very peaceful.
I think too, friends and family who come to visit just love it. They love being involved, in what we're doing. Remember when Liz came girlfriend of mine from Australia, but she was staying in the cabin. She said, I think I could just live here forever, you know. We got to show her around, you know, Texas and what have you, but then come back here and it's just so quiet and yeah. So having family and friends really appreciate and come and visit and enjoy what we're doing as well is really great.
Like if I could tell someone, if I could tell anyone, no matter where you're at or what you're doing, grow something today. Grow some food for you and your family and your neighbors today. There's nothing more important than food, water, and shelter in our lives. And so if you can do anything to grow food, create healthy water, clean water, or build some wonderful shelter for you or your family or your neighbors, do that. Create something today. Stop analyzing it, create it.